Okay, so I get a fair number of requests for weapon restricted runs still, and lately I have been getting suggestions for runs using only unique or legendary weapons in games like Fallout and The Elder Scrolls. Truth be told, I've thought about doing a New Vegas unique weapons run, only where the main goal is to collect every single unique weapon before finishing the main story for quite some time now. No doubt it will still happen at some point, but today I decided to pivot more towards The Elder Scrolls and its Daedric artifacts. Why? Well, first off, each of them requires a quest to be completed before you get them, most even being level gated, as opposed to a large majority of, say, New Vegas's, which, let's be real, you can just walk up and grab within minutes of starting. That isn't a bad thing, mind you. I love having access to Chance's knife 5 seconds after having my brain shoved back into my skull. As for the second reason, well, messing around with the Volendrung briefly for footage for the Lucy video got me in the mood to do this. I would have done it in Oblivion, but I don't know why I didn't. To give a quick rundown of what this will entail, a fair amount of grinding for levels, way too many weapons, and very little armour. I'm also not allowing myself to use any kind of outside healing, as 2 of the artifacts let you heal in somewhat different ways, so in other words, no healing spells or potions. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. First off, race. A lack of any real defense outside of 3 pieces of armor, one of which I won't even have access to until I am level 30, I figured I should go with whatever race gives me the best resistances. After mulling it over for a bit, I decided to go with a Nord for their 50% frost resistance. Dark Elves for fire, or Bretons for magic would also have been a good choice, but frost draining stamina as well as health is always an annoyance to me, so anything to help alleviate that frustration is good. Plus, I'll probably be fighting a decent amount of Draugr, and they all love to pelt you with frost magic. More importantly, it allows me to make my very generic character, whom I slot into every game that will allow me. We all know how this goes by now. You're briefly put at risk of getting a 1 back in sides, but are thankfully saved in the nick of time by irony. I choose to skedaddle with Hadvar, simply because when doing things this way, you start with the key to the nearby door, for some reason, meaning you don't have to wait around for the NPCs to kill each other. So, while they're all doing that, I escape into the open world and begin planning my course of action. Now, many of the Daedric quests are level gated, some as low as level 10, and others as high as 30. However, there are a select few that can be acquired right out of the gate. The first one that came to mind was the Mace of Molag Bal. After all, I'm not going to get very far in these quests if I can't fight back. To make things just a tad more interesting than fast travelling all over the map right away, I decided I wouldn't be allowed to use any of the horse and carts, and would therefore need to manually run to each city on my first visit. In retrospect, this doesn't do a whole lot more than just add to the length of the recording sessions, as it was pretty rare that anything worth including in the video actually happened during these jaunts across the plains. On the bright side, it does let me mark locations such as Rorikstead and Karthspire on the map, which will be helpful as we will be coming back to them later. Arriving at Markarth, and I get to speaking with Tyrannus. And next thing you know, we are ghost busting our way through a haunted house, ending with us being forced to kill each other because the walls told us to. Goes without saying, but without any prior artifacts, fending off the crazy priest is an impossibility right now. I also cannot leave the house until I kill him, so in other words, I am stuck. So I reload a save prior to entering the building and decide to go after another relic, the Wabbajack. This was always my fallback plan should the mace not work out. I know we all love Sheogorath's craziness and whimsy, but in terms of a quest, it's rather simple. You just shoot things with a staff for about 10 minutes until he sends you home. With the staff in hand, I return to the hunting grounds, and this time make good on the demands of the house by taking out Tyrannus with 2 blasts from the Wabbajack. I thought that was the end of the quest, but clearly it has really been far too long since I've bothered to collect most of these mystical doodads, because as it turns out, I now need to go retrieve a cultist from a rival cult and bring him to Molag Bal to force him to submit. The problem here is that the cultist in question is currently being held by the Forsworn, for whatever reason, meaning I will need to fight my way through them as well. This is somewhat of a problem for 2 reasons. First, it's generally just a bad idea to face down a whole band of Forsworn at level 1 with no protection, and secondly, the Wabbajack being a staff means it only has a set number of charges before it needs to be juiced up again. Something which can only be done with a soul gem, something I am not allowing myself to use as Azura's Star, another artifact we will be swinging by to collect shortly, is a reusable soul gem, ergo the stupid rules I have set for myself mean normal soul gems are out of the question. The one bright spot in all of this is the Wabbajack itself, I suppose. While it may only have a set amount of uses, the fact that it can do one of many random effects, a few of which are instant kills, such as turning people into ghostly remains, coins, or a sweet roll, then I could technically get through the encounter so long as RNGesus is on our side. Most of the Forsworn aren't as defensively strong as I initially thought, which I suppose makes sense given what they were. Honestly, the only real trouble I ran into were the Shamans. Their spells cooked me within seconds if I got too close, plus their wards completely nullified anything from the staff. Stealth was one of my best friends during this encounter, and to jump ahead a little, probably something I should have put a bigger focus on going forward in the run, but I digress. You can't get stealth crits with the Wabbajack obviously, but I can slink away behind these here rocks, wait for their goldfish brains to forget about me, and then pop a few charges from the shadows to deal with some of the weaker ones, and then rinse and repeat. Doing this, I also noticed that I was probably giving the Shamans far too much credit. If I were to simply hold down the right trigger and keep a charge of the staff trained on them, they would then just fire up their ward. Keeping it active this whole time uses magicka every second, whereas doing something similar with the staff does not. In other words, I just stood like this and waited for them to run out of magic, and as soon as they did, retaliate with my weaponized randomizer. When it came down to the final few, I was lucky enough to save a few potential charges by turning one of the Forsworn into a Dremora, who then proceeded to take out a few of their former allies before turning back. When I finally dealt with the last one, I think I literally had a single blast of the staff left, so this couldn't have been any more down to the wire. With them gone, I can convince the cultist to return with me to Markarth, and after he is stuck in the spike walls, sorta, I can do Molag Bal's final bidding of bludgeoning him repeatedly with the rusty mace. Once the deed is done, I am now rewarded for my efforts with the Mace of Molag Bal. The mace has a base damage of 18, as well as some powerful enchantments. It inflicts 25 points of magicka and stamina damage, but more importantly, it can soul trap. That means if I can complete the quest for Azura's Star before the charges run out on the mace, then I can effectively have an infinite supply of soul gems. So, goes without saying, I'm off to the Shrine of Azura. Quickest way there is by fast travelling back to Whiterun and sprinting northeast through the mountains. Even with the mace in hand, I do my best to ignore what I can because, like I said, I still have to be careful with the magical charges as I'll need a few available for when I finally get the star so that I can feed it. At the shrine, and I'm only there for a few seconds before being sent down to Winterhold, where I can then speak with Nelacar and get to actually retrieving the star. Despite Nelacar never giving us an exact location, we somehow know exactly where it can be located. Convenient. The place, Ilinelta's Deep. The problem, a whole bunch of wizards and necromancers, along with me still running around Starkers. I fought a few of the mages who attempted to slow me down. Fortunately, most of them were using frost magic, so my Nordic chest hair was able to combat that to a degree. Once the magical energy of the mace dropped below half, I stopped fighting and just began running through the remainder of the dungeon. At the very least, the mages and necromancers that I bolted past stopped following me once I got to the door to a separate loading zone. However, that doesn't mean we're home free. More powerful wizards await through here, so that's nice. Again, I fought a few to help even the playing field, but none of that truly mattered when I tried to face down the apprentice here and his small gang of skeletons. See, I initially thought he was the one with the star, but much like with the Molag Bal quest, it's clearly been so long that my memory is failing me. Turns out when I enter his room, all I need to do is hug the left hand wall and follow the stairs up until I reach another room, where in which I will find a corpse that is keeping the star warm for me. This star is unfortunately broken because nothing is allowed to go right when it comes to Daedra worship. So now I am presented with two options. I can either return to the shrine for repairs, or I can hit up Nelacar again in Winterhold, seeing how he knows so much about it. And to be blunt, you are an idiot if you try to take it back to the shrine. Doing that returns it to its base self, which allows any kind of white soul to pass through it. So pretty much anything that isn't another playable race. However, Nelacar is hardcore and will instead transform it into the Black Star, which can absorb black souls, meaning any race's soul is mine. Seeing how you tend to fight a lot of bandits and whatnot, this is a complete no-brainer. Oh, and possibly due to faulty programming or the like, the Black Star can also absorb any white soul, so it's literally just a better version no matter what way you slice it. Before Nelacar can do this, we do have one final task, and that is to head into the star itself and kill the necromancer who was attempting to use its power to make himself immortal. He himself is rather weak, it's the random Daedra mages in the place that can pose a real threat. They managed to kill me on a few attempts, even one time after I dealt with Varen, due to there being a delay between killing him and escaping the soul world. The trick was to simply rush him as soon as I got inside and go nuts. If I was able to hit him hard enough with the mace, I could stagger him, leading to a few more hits on my end, which would quickly win me the fight. Plus, if it was done fast enough, he won't have time to run far enough in to bring in his Daedric posse, allowing me to simply wait around until Malacath can pick me up. With the quest complete and the Black Star acquired, this run can finally start going somewhere. I head over to Embershard Mine, because I know it has a bunch of low-level bandits, and get to work soul-sucking and decimating them with the mace. Recharging the mace and the Wabbajack gets me levels in enchanting, and of course, using the mace levels up my one-handed and occasionally block skills. Seeing how staffs aren't tied to any skills and therefore cannot help me increase my level and get to the thresholds for the other artifact quests, don't be shocked if you don't really see me using them very often in the early grindy stages of the run. With my effective beating stick of the gods doing work on every bandit and angry tree lady that I can see out in the field, I began making my way to Falkreath, as not only does it have 2 Daedric quests to start, but both of them reward me with armor, which is the one big thing that I'm lacking. Well, having the ability to heal would also be nice, but that won't really be a thing until we get to level 20.
That mace. Get it away from me. Get it away.
Ooh, what you gonna do, little man?
Disrespect the law and you disrespect me.
Yeah, alright, okay. Once more, the quest for Clavicus Vial is level locked, however, the quest for Hircine isn't, so we start that one by agreeing to take a ring from a werewolf in the town's prison. Weird choice to leave the supernatural creature inside the one cell with no ceiling, but whatever. Hunting the white stag for the next stage of the quest is always a brain-dead endeavour, mostly due to the fact that the stag has a bad habit of getting stuck on Skyrim's level geometry and begging for death. Hircine is for some reason impressed by this simple act of deer clubbing and invites me to the proper hunt, that being hunting down Sindling, the werewolf we just helped free not 2 minutes ago. Arriving at the hunting grounds and we are presented with a choice: continue the hunt and skin the werewolf, or side with him and kill the hunters. There's a well-known exploit here where by doing things in a specific order you can get both the upgraded ring for helping Sindling and the Saviour's hide armor for killing him. I decided against it, mainly because the ring doesn't actually give you the ability to go full furry, rather it just gives you unlimited transformations when you get the power from the companions, so in other words, the form isn't an artifact and would invalidate the run. Plus, again, the Saviour's hide armor will just be more beneficial in the long run, as it will be by far the most substantial piece of gear we can acquire for a very long time. The poison resistance doesn't really wow me, but the 15% magic resistance is nothing to scoff at. If I had actually remembered this, I probably would have gone with a Breton at the start, due to their racial ability of being ignorant and therefore having magic be less effective on them. Anyway, as you can see, Sindling is weak as all hell, so not a lot to run through. I did also slaughter the rest of the hunters. After all, any XP is good XP, and we still have 26 more levels to go. On to the next artifact, and turns out Falkreath isn't the only town with 2 Daedric lords being involved with it, as back in Markarth, we learn the bodies in the halls of the dead have been found to have been desecrated. More specifically, something has been eating them, well, not something, more like someone. As it turns out, worshippers of Namira have been indulging in the fine dining experience. You would think the cannibals would be more hostile, but in fact they are rather inviting. And I mean actually welcoming and not like they want me for supper. I am to meet them at a cave just outside of town that I am to help clear out in time for lunch. On the way, I had a little fun interaction with a Legion soldier when I saved him from some attacking Forsworn. This isn't me showing my political favoritism or anything. Truth be told, I'm not even touching the Civil War this time. I've got more than enough to get through as is without the repetitive questline bogging things down. You could argue it's good for skill experience, but honestly, I think I would rather just go into random caves at this point and start bullying Draugr. Which, as a matter of fact, is exactly what the next part of this quest entails. With 50% frost resistance, some armor, and that magic resistance, I can hold my own rather easily against even the most difficult Draugr. To be fair, the mace's magic at damaging enchantment helps to stop any casters with a few well-placed bonks. Once the place is cleared, I am sent back to Markarth one final time to convince the priest who got me started on this whole plot for his assistance at said cave. Naturally, we take him to the altar, and I am to prepare the meal. I am specifically told to carve the body, but given our weapon of choice, I guess it's more like I am tenderizing. Regardless, doing so allows me to chow down, ending the quest, and receiving the Ring of Namira, which will allow me to eat any humanoid corpse I choose, healing me for a small amount, as well as giving a boost to health regeneration. Oh, and it also grants me a permanent 50 points to stamina while I wear the ring. Considering there are no other Daedric rings, there's no reason for me to ever take this off. Can't really complain about that, as every single level up I've been ignoring my stamina and increasing my health by 10 points instead. Figured it's just the best way to increase my ability to live. There is one more artifact immediately available to me, and not to mince words, it is by far the most useless one for this entire run. I am of course referring to the Staff Corruption. Gone are the days of Oblivion, where it was a unique, quirky little staff that made evil clones of whoever it hit, allowing for fun exploits to get you access to normally inaccessible items in conjunction with the Staff of Worms. Now it simply just shoots a magical ball of energy that does some damage, and a little bit more if you suck out someone's dreams with it or whatever. I never even bothered to mess around with the Dream Suck. Again, just like the Wabbajack, it cannot help me level up. Plus, if I am in a situation where I want to use a staff, the Wabbajack is just the better option due to it having the chance to instantly kill almost any foe. Alright, I should probably talk about the quest to get the damn thing. Well, off in Dawnstar, the people are having night terrors, like the kind where you live out an entire school day only to wake up into the realization it was all in your head, and now you still have to go into class and listen to your teacher randomly drone on about the fact that earwax is a vital part of the human body and should not be removed, essentially confirming that this 40-something-year-old man is essentially preaching to you that he is proud of the fact that he has never cleaned his ears. To help the tired townsfolk, we team up with the resident priest of Arcade to make our way to the nearby fort/temple and deal with the source of the terrors. For the most part, it is your average dungeon. Things get a tad more interesting when you start sipping on some leftover juice in these here bottles, allowing you to relive the memories of one of the Daedric priests who used to worship here. Turns out the person's memories we are reliving are in fact that of the priest of Arcade, as this is what he used to do with his free time before he found Jesus. Well, like most cults, things went sideways in record time. All the priests but our guy here got hit with copious amounts of sleeping gas and have remained dormant here until we came in and began causing a ruckus. That includes the orcs who were attacking the priests at the time of all this going down. As you can see, I just bash and batter my way to victory until we come face to face with the staff itself. Like many things in this run, it begins to speak to me and tells me to murder the priest and take the staff for myself. Not taking the time to question if I may in fact just be crazy due to having a half-frozen brain from running around most of Skyrim in nothing but our small clothes, I then take the mace and begin to make paste. The quest then just ends without any real conclusion, so that's cool I guess. I have only just hit level 6 at this stage, so I need to get 3 more levels in me before a few more quests open up. I figured the best way to start this was by going through Bleak Falls Barrow. It's a required part of the main quest that I will have to get to sooner or later, and seeing how I want the XP, I figured I could hit it up now. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but rocking up to what is expected to be the player's first dungeon with weapons and armor gifted to me by otherworldly demons, that means I am in and out of this place in like 5 minutes. Still, some good one-handed XP gains though, so it's at least efficient. I also returned the Claw to Lookin for some reason. Even though gold is essentially pointless in this run outside of a few times and I guess it might have used to bribe people, but those always seem very few and far between in Skyrim. I head up Whiterun next, as a few of the residents do have some rather mundane tasks that can be completed rather quickly that do give you immediate skill increases. The 2 main ones that come to mind are helping Amren retrieve his family's sword and going poaching for mammoth tusks for Isolde. Well, as luck would have it, I won't need to try and face down a mammoth with my squishy bones, as Amren actually ends up sending me to retrieve the sword from Hulda's Steam Camp, a seemingly average bandit camp, but inside they are skinning mammoths, so there are plenty of tusks lining the place just waiting to be stolen. I tried practicing my sneak skill to get a few levels in that for good measure, but that idea doesn't last very long as I'm spotted rather quick in the mine, resulting in your usual slobber knocker. I thought the chief would prove to be trouble, but fortunately he was far too slow to be able to really land a strike of worth on me. I returned the items to their respective quest givers, get some skill levels, and then because I could think of nothing better to do, began the Missing in Action quest. 2 things of note. On the way, I located the Shrine of Meridia for later, and during my adventures in Northwatch Keep, which resulted in far more deaths than I am comfortable admitting, I was able to reach level 9, unlocking the next few Daedric quests. Malacath's quest was now up for grabs, and seeing how the prize was a 2-handed warhammer, it was what I began making a beeline for. You know me, any big sledgehammer-esque weapon is just right up my alley, so the Volendrung speaks to me. Plus, you know, it's another skill to level up to make this grind to 30 a little less miserable. The quest begins at an orc stronghold in the southeast near Riften. Rather than take my usual jaunt around the mountains past Whiterun, I instead travelled back to Helgen and made my way through the passage there. Not much on the way other than some run-of-the-mill bandits. However, I was briefly caught off guard by the presence of goblins closer to the orc stronghold. Okay, I legit forgot that the Legendary Edition even added them into the game in select areas. It's pretty cool. Kinda just wish they were more common, given that I've been recording runs off of the Legendary Edition for nearly 3 years now. And this is the first time they've popped up in a run. When I arrive at the stronghold, I find it is currently under siege by a single giant. Now, I don't know if it's because I took way too long messing with them goblins outside, but by the time I got to confronting the big guy, almost every single member of the Orc clan had been wiped out. On a bright note, that does mean the giant has been put through the ringer, so he is already under half health. This makes my job of swooping in to steal the credit all the easier. One of the few survivors is an Orc mage, a rare breed. She informs me of their troubles and tells me she needs to consult Malacath for advice. Because nothing can be done for free, she requests for me to bring her a Daedra heart and some troll fat. The former is going to be a little tricky to get my hands on this early in the game. Troll fat, on the other hand, is rather straightforward. I just took out the two in the cave just outside of Whiterun, the one that has Fruki's bow in it. My first thought was trying some alchemists for the heart, obviously. Well, after multiple cycles of the murder shop restock glitch, I was never lucky enough to have even one show up. So my next idea was a Shrine of Dagon, cause after all it does have some Dremora inside it that you can kill during the Dagon quest. Well, again, long story short, I got there, and of course the door to the shrine is locked until I get to the quest. Alright, perhaps leveling up will help. Merchants tend to get rarer and better goods in the higher your level is after all. Rather than grind out on more random bandits and the like, I figured I could kill 2 Daedra lords with 1 stone, so to speak. At level 9 I can return to Falkreath and begin the Clavicus Vial quest where I can meet Barbas, the talking dog just outside of town. Like every sentient creature in Skyrim who has the ability to speak, he of course asks for my assistance. I oblige because I am in desperate need of some armour, and the two of us begin heading for parts unknown. Annoyingly, this is like one of those infamous Assassin's Creed missions, you know the ones, where you must walk with an NPC but their movement speed is faster than your walk but slower than your run, but the game won't inform you of exactly where you need to go, so you kinda just meander next to them for 10 minutes. The one bright spot of this journey was a bandit encounter where Barbas took a rock to the head like an absolute champ. Ironically, as it turns out, I had already marked the cave we were heading to on the map earlier when we were heading for the Orc stronghold. That's nice. The cave is home to some vampires, cause Clavicus Vial is into that, I guess. It doesn't take long to clear out the infestation, the mace is getting stronger with each level gained after all, and considering it's still my only means of defending myself outside of the staffs, it's leveling up a lot. Speaking of levels, I do level up again during all of this, so once we are done, we can see about going heart hunting again. The joys. Around this point, I also upped the difficulty to hard. Thought it would be fun, but really, if enemies have more health, realistically, I should be able to level my weapon skills up on them even faster. Dealing with everything in the cave isn't actually the end of the quest, as once we get to the shrine, Vial asks us to retrieve the rueful axe for him. We'll keep this brief, it's basically just a radiant quest. You walk in, beat up an old man, and grab the axe. Luckily, it was also near Northwatch, so I was back with the axe in less than 5 minutes. We're now presented with a choice. Deny Clavicus Vial and keep the rueful axe, or use the axe to slay Barbas and be rewarded with the Masque of Clavicus Vial. Considering my need to protect myself, the armour is a rather simple decision. Besides, I read that the axe might not even count as one of the artifacts technically needed to get the achievement for collecting all the Daedric Shrine artifacts, and if that's the case, then grabbing the helmet is what I need to do regardless of preference. The Masque makes buying and selling prices better, as well as adding an extra base of 25 to my armour, so it's alright. Again, no real reason to buy or sell things outside of the Daedra heart we are hunting for. Speaking of which, I travelled to Solitude, and after only 1 reset, was able to buy a heart from Angeline. Returning to the orcs, and Bathtub here is finally able to complete the ritual, and she informs her chieftain that Malacath requires him to hunt down and kill the leader of the giants who have been attacking the stronghold. That would all be well and good, except for the fact that Ymars here is a little bitch. With that in mind, he forces me to come with him and protect him so that he can reach the leader unharmed. To be fair, the cave leading to the giant leader is naturally filled with a few more giants, so it's not like it's the easiest dungeon to get through. Granted, I do it, but you know, that's because I'm a real certified gamer and I used OP stealth crits with the mace. Making it to the grove, and Ymars the slimy git attempts to bribe me with gold to have me do his dirty work for him. I politely decline, and then sit back and watch him take down the giant.
Wait here. This should only take a second.
I'm a lot smarter than he is, which isn't a high bar, I'm aware, but at least I had the sense to 1, fight back, and 2, actually used guard breaks to stun the giant to completely trivialise the fight. For good measure, and because I hadn't used either in a while, I got the last shots off with the Wabbajack and the Skull of Corruption. Returning to the clan, or I suppose couple, now that there's a grand total of 2 orcs left, and I am rewarded for my efforts with the Volendrung, a cool looking hammer that is sadly nowhere even close to as overpowered as it was in Oblivion. To be fair, I understand why. If you kept that thing charged, 99% of the enemies could never even fight back against you. So rather than having a paralysing enchantment, this time it just absorbs 50 points of stamina per swing. That does sound good, as it means you technically have access to infinite power attacks so long as you connect them. But you know what else can do that and heal you constantly for a few minutes? Vegetable soup. In other words, this otherworldly weapon, forged by a Daedric lord, is not as powerful as a bowl of warm broth. Next up, I figured I could do Peryite. Sure, I just spent the last hour doing odd jobs to get a 2-handed weapon, but having access to a shield in my back pocket that can defend against physical and magical attacks just seemed like a no-brainer. Plus, it would pair nicely with the mace. Because the place just attracts horrible people or something, Peryite's Shrine is also up around the Markarth area of the map. Granted, this one at least isn't inside the town, but still. When I get there, Kesh will not allow me to start the quest. Probably a level thing, so I guess that means it's back to grinding. Much like before with Bleak Falls, I figured it couldn't hurt to get a little bit more of the main story out of the way, so it was finally time to introduce myself to Jarl Balgruuf and see about sorting out my first dragon. Volendrung absolutely annihilates the dragon, by the way. Heavy attacks tend to stun them mid-attack animations, so being able to keep doing them without ever having to worry about running out of juice pretty much puts me in a position where I cannot lose. This is the first dragon, to be fair, so things could get more difficult later on, especially with Alduin. Disposing of the Sky Lizard isn't enough to level me up, so I begin just doing random bandit clearouts like in Pine Watch and that one cave that has the best blind joke in the game. Goes without saying, but the entire time I am doing this, I am also searching every end of every dungeon loot chest for Meridia's beacon, seeing how this is the first time in my life where I genuinely want my eardrums to be ruptured by her. I may never have found the goddess's disco ball, but I was right that an extra level gained while slaughtering was enough for Kesh to take notice. He wants me to take part in the ritual huffing of the fumes, but to do so, I of course need to gather the ingredients. All of them are rather mundane items you can find with most merchants. The only one that gave me trouble was tracking down a flawless ruby. Something you'd normally randomly pick up in any old dungeon and then just sell for a small profit. For whatever reason though, I could just not find one, be it in a dungeon, cave, or even at local traders. After searching cluelessly for far longer than I should have, I caved and just looked up guaranteed locations for the ruby. As it turns out, there is one not too far from the shrine itself. All I have to do is follow the river near Markarth until I find this abandoned boat, and inside we'll find a bunch of gems, one of which is the ruby. Returning to Kesh and we can make the special smoke, and after just taking a big ol' whiff, we can communicate with Peryite. You can tell it must have been quality stuff because Peryite begins speaking over himself like a Sonic Adventure 2 cutscene.
Let these vapors. I have watched you for some time.
To be
I'll make you eat those words!
The long and short of it is one of his followers was sent to gather some of the sick for him, and now he has betrayed Peryite, so now it's my job to go and clean up the mess. To keep things interesting, the Afflicted we are fighting through in this quest have their own unique attack, where they have somehow managed to weaponize the power of Nickelodeon slime. It doesn't do a whole lot, mind you, especially when they're within hammer distance, but points for individuality. While the Afflicted were nothing to write home about, the Dwemer robots were able to pack a wallop. The stamina drain from the Volendrung doesn't work on them, so my cheesy strat of just spamming power attacks is out the window. That said, being so aggressive with the mallet has pushed me to level 15, so I'm not too opposed to briefly switching over to the Wabbajack to help speed things along. In fact, I got super lucky at one stage when I managed to transform a Centurion into a sweet roll. I shall not eat him, but he will be accompanying us for the rest of our adventures. Making it to the end of the ruins, and it's time to face down Ochender, the Betrayer. He's a surprisingly tanky mage, so that's not good. Also seems to deal a good amount of damage, as even my natural resistances to frost don't faze him all that much. I thought that repeated attacking with the mace would force him to stop casting as it would damage his magicka, but that also did not work. I then swapped over to the Volendrung for the tried and true technique, but because the game hits me, he is also just immune to stamina drains. So I didn't have the defenses to outlast him in a head-to-head fight, although if I'm being real, that's probably down to him teleporting away anytime I was starting to unload the damage. What this meant is that a lot of the fight just involved me walking around this pillar in a circle so that I could regen enough health to jump back in his face for another assault. Again, having a reliable way to heal can't come soon enough. I thought the ability to chow down on people would have been it, but it's not really as effective as I thought it would be. Eventually, I was able to quite literally get the drop on him after he followed me up some stairs, and somehow I was able to deal just enough damage to activate a kill move, which, funnily enough, triggered right as he teleported. I still got the win, don't fret about that, although it did take me quite a long time to find exactly where his corpse had portaled off to. Once I did, I procured the exit key, and just like that, we were blessed with another artifact. The Spellbreaker is honestly just a huge upgrade. An extra 42 armor is good enough on its own, but that doubled with the magical ward while guarding? Well, realistically, I shouldn't be having much trouble with mages again, or at least not until they start to scale out of control. With the levels gained from culling the sick, I at least have one more quest open to me, and this time it's one I actually remember, and for good reason. Back in Whiterun, or any inn once you hit the right level, Sanguine here will now be waiting by the bar, ready to challenge you to a drinking game. I should probably decline, but I am far too distracted by the fact that he shares his voice actor with that of Rigby from Regular Show. Well, we indulge in the drinkiest of games, and naturally this ends with us blacking out, and in true hangover fashion, leaving us to put the pieces together of what exactly happened the night prior. We awaken Malacath because the Daedric have a perpetual hard-on for the place, and get to work cleaning up the random trash we tossed around the temple during our drunken stupor. After apologising to the priestess, she tells us that we were yelling about something to do with Rorikstead, so now we can make our way there to see a man about a goat. Although, to be honest, I am much more interested in the gravity-defying cows. Well, the goat's not here. As it turns out, we staged a heist and sold it to a giant. Wish my guy was this capable all the time. Anyway, we go to see about getting the goat back, and the giant responds in kind by asking us how the grass tastes. I would like to say on the next try we played better and put the new shield bashing to good use, but truthfully, the giant suffered from a blast of sheer stupidity and just kinda kept rotating on the spot, refusing to fight back. With his soul captured, I returned the goat, and now I'm sent back to Whiterun to repay Isolde. You'd think the mammoth tusk would have been enough, but evidently not. Upon speaking with her again, we learned that she allowed us to borrow a family wedding ring, which we seem to have used already to get married. When we meet our lovely wife, we make the discovery that she is a hag raven. I mean, she ain't much worse than most of the locals. And besides, I have unfortunately been to Lover's Lab, and I have seen what people can mod the hag ravens to look like. We have a bit of a lover's spat, and things quickly get out of hand, that being, she inflicts me with the YouTuber disease, and I kill her. We're now near the end of the runaround, so after we return the ring to Isolde, she gives us a location of where to get the staff. Oh god, yeah right, forgot to mention, one of the whole reasons we're doing all this, other than to piece together our memories, is that we've been looking for a staff we were promised by Sam during the drinking game. The fort housing the thing is covered in mages, meaning we can either die like a schmuck or put that new shield to good use. I chose to do both. You don't actually need to deal with them all to get through, by the way, you can just dash past a lot of them and run straight for the portal. Once through, we are greeted by Sanguine, who then turns out to be none other than the Daedric prince, Sanguine. Let me tell you, I have never questioned my intelligence more than when I first saw this little twist when I was 13 and felt like an idiot for not figuring it out before the end of the quest. For all of the running around, we are gifted the staff, that being Sanguine's Rose. The staff will summon a Dremora for 60 seconds, so that could be rather useful to keep the pressure off when fighting multiple enemies. Again, probably won't use it too much, but it is still better than the Skull of Corruption, that's what's most important. Believe it or not, I somehow still had no luck finding Meridia's beacon. I know, the one time I needed, and it's just nowhere to be found. I had never had this much hassle trying to find the beacon before, and I was rather stumped on what to do next. Out of curiosity, I just fast traveled back to her shrine outside of Solitude, and as it turns out, if you interact with the statue, she will contact you and mark the location of the beacon. I had absolutely no idea this was a thing. I just assumed you would just have to randomly find it eventually, never even crossed my mind that there would be another way to begin the quest. Well, as it turns out, the beacon is in fact back in Morvenskr. That is the fort where we literally just wrapped up the Sanguine questline. Guess I was closer to starting this quest than I thought. I left quite a few of the mages alive when I made that mad dash for the portal, so I was preparing to deal with them when I began to hear commotion further in. Turns out, Sanguine himself just chills around in here after the quest, and I guess, since we are buddies, he just begins slaughtering all of the mages on my behalf. And given the fact that he is a Daedric lord, yeah, they physically cannot even scratch him. I even tried attacking him out of curiosity, but as expected, all of your attacks just go right through him. Well, with the mages slain, I effortlessly retrieve the orb from the chest in the back, and then return to Meridia so I can get to lighting up her temple like some sort of medieval fantasy electrician. The temple is filled to the brim with these new enemies called Corrupted Shades. For the most part, they are just reskinned skeletons, with all the offensive and defensive capabilities that brings, so you can imagine how I breeze past them with my exclusively blunt weapons. That goes for the final boss room as well. Even though there's a greater number of them than before, I can just funnel them into the entryway and knock them down one at a time. This made me believe I was hot shit, however, so whenever I rushed the boss of the dungeon, Malcoran, he quickly demonstrated that he is in fact another mage, and that despite my natural resistances, he was going to effortlessly embarrass me by one-shotting me with a frost spell. Next try, and I think to myself, if he is going to be a little bitch and hide behind his ads, then I can do the exact same thing. So I whip out the rose and let my summoned demon do most of the work. He quickly cuts his way through the shades, but runs into trouble when fighting the wizard. That's alright, him acting as a distraction is just as beneficial, so I break out the Wabbajack as well for some of that illustrious dual staff action. I figured I'd just be running support, but once more my luck reigned supreme as I proc an instant death effect from the Wabbajack, immediately ending the fight after only 2 blasts from the thing. With the fight won, I can now retrieve the Dawnbreaker, a one-handed fiery sword that excels at dispatching the undead. Could be useful given the sheer abundance of Draugr in Skyrim. That said, I am almost stubbornly attached to the mace and hammer at this point, although I will make sure to use it at least once like everything else. I am crowned Meridia's champion for my efforts, and I am free to go on my merry way. You know, for as much as we joke about how annoying the beacon is, it's kinda crazy just how short the quest revolving it is. This whole endeavour, death and all, only took me just over 15 minutes. Currently, I am level 16 if you're curious, so I think it's high time we head on over to Septimus Cygnus and start inadvertently working for the hentai monster. Of course, before I can enjoy some fine reading, I will need to help Septimus with his problems, which does align with me needing to grab the Elder Scroll for the main plot anyway, so this just helps everybody involved. It's a true win-win-win scenario if ever there was one. I have been through this ruin countless times, so it's no real different than normal. The Dwemertrons are a little more annoying than usual given the lack of armour on my end, but I am able to get some good mileage out of dual-wielding the Mace of Molag Bal and the Dawnbreaker. Sure, I lack a way to cover my sensitive areas when both hands are on the offensive, but with the damage I can output, so long as I'm not trying to face down multiple enemies at a single time, I am usually able to flurry them to death before they can do much in return. The Fulmer are a little trickier by virtue of them hitting harder. Given their lack of eyeballs, it probably would have been a smarter idea to try and sneak past them. The Dawnbreaker seems to be the way to go when facing them down. Have to assume they are at least a little bit weak to fire damage given the whole snow elf thing. There are a lot of them in the lower sections of the ruins, so once again I start summoning demons, as people are known to do when backed into a corner. The strategy was clearly going well as it gave me the confidence to fight the nearby Centurion. To my surprise, he was way easier than the Fulmer. Yeah, for whatever reason, he just couldn't decide on who to attack between me and the Dremora. That said, even when he did take a swing, he seemed to just keep missing every time. Works for me, I suppose. Killing Umana and Sulla in the room right before Blackreach pushes me to level 17, so all the closer to being done with the incessant grinding. Speaking of, down in Blackreach, I thought about fighting my way through for the extra XP gains, but after comparing damage numbers, shall we say, with the very first Dwarven Sphere, I opted to just book it for the scroll instead. Could I have killed everything down here? Maybe, but it may also have been more of a hassle than it was worth. Besides, now that I have the scroll, I can return to Septimus and get started on the process of renting out the Oghma Infinium. To open the funny looking door, all I need is the blood of each race of elf. If you have even a basic understanding of Skyrim and its people, this task shouldn't take any more than 10 minutes. First up are the Wood and Dark Elves, both of which can be done at the Drunken Huntsman inside Whiterun. Rather than start slaughtering immediately, I briefly hire out the services of Janessa, our Dark Elf bloodbag, as I murder the Wood Elf shopkeeper. The only reason I am wasting the 500 gold doing this is, as expected, the instant the Wood Elf's body drops, the sound of him hitting the hardwood floor alerts every single guard in a 2-mile radius, and as such, I am fighting for my life. Having Janessa soak up some of the damage, as well as output a good bit, certainly helps. Once there is a small break in the reinforcements, I turn on Janessa so that I may add her blood to the key. I don't exactly feel like paying my fine or serving jail time, so the plan here is to just sprint for the town exit. There is a slight snag in the plan when, of course, the courier stops me immediately to hand over a letter of inheritance. Confused as to who it could possibly be, I read it to find out it was none other than Janessa. That's really sad if you think about it. Next up was Orc, easiest of the bunch. I just returned to the clan settlement where I got Volendrung and finished off what the giants started. Also, turns out there were more than 2 survivors, who would have thought. Anyway, only 2 more elves to go, and I attempted to be stealthy about the next one. I tried to silently assassinate the high elves who run the Radiant Raiment shop in Solitude, but I guess loudly breaking someone's skull in half with a blunt instrument isn't the quietest way to go about it. As such, I am thrown in the Solitude jail. Fortunately, it's my first time being here, so once the guard turns around, I push away the rotting wall in the back and make my escape. I make sure to pick the chest through the conveniently placed hole in the wall as well, so that I can get my stuff too. As nobody saw me leave, I am not being pursued, and I'm free to fast travel to wherever I please. All that's left is the Fulmer, and while going back to the ruin I was just in would be the smart idea, I completely forgot to unlock the shortcut before Blackreach, so if I wanted to go back I would need to take the long way. I tried the plate glitch because I'm lazy, but when that failed multiple times I said screw it and just went to Shimmer Mist Cave. It's a little bit north of Whiterun, very close to the halted stream camp we got the mammoth tusks at earlier, and you only need to go into the first room of the cave to meet your first Fulmer, so after a quick duel, we can suck the creature dry, and then return to Septimus for our next artifact. Septimus gets cut short in his final words because nobody really cares about him, and then we are finally gifted the book. I read it right away, and shocking nobody, I read the Path of Might. It covers just about every single skill we're actively using, so there's no reason not to. This pushes me to level 19, but better yet, maybe only 1 or 2 skill levels from hitting 20, gaining us access to 2 more Daedric quests. Since Halted Stream was fresh in my mind, and because the bandits would have had time to repopulate by now, I return and begin cracking skulls. I let some of them attack me to get up my block and light armor skills, and then finally reach level 20 when my 2-handed skill increases and pushes me over the threshold. My next 2 quests begin in Whiterun and Dawnstar. I decide to head to Dawnstar first for literally no reason. Entering the newly opened Mythic Dawn Museum, which is just a bad idea from the get-go, and we can begin browsing the artifacts on display. This leads to the museum's owner, Silas, offering us a job, that being to retrieve the final 3 pieces of Mehrunes' razor so that he may reforge it for his collection. We of course agree, and thankfully get all 3 pieces marked on our map for convenience. Okay, so this isn't part of the run, but there's a very fun glitch here that you can do with a page of the Mysterium Xerxes. If you unlock the cabinet it is in, and then equip and use your flame spell on it, this happens. This has been a thing since day 1, I have no idea why, but it is something I do in every casual run of mine without fail. While I may have just picked up the Dagon quest, it is one of the longer ones with me having to travel a fair bit, so I figured I could quickly hit up the Whiterun quest as I do remember that one and it is pretty short. It takes a minute to get the rumour from the local innkeeper that actually allows you to start the quest once you learn that there's something wrong with one of the Jarl's kids. And I don't mean just the fact that he's a little brat. Turns out he has been speaking to a door in the basement that refers to itself as the Whispering Lady. In other words, the Daedric Prince Mephala. All you literally need to do in this quest is unlock the door to get the artifact. I'm not even kidding. Sure, it cannot be picked, so you need to find the key, but speaking with the Jarl's son again, and he tells you that his father and Farengar both have a key, and that nobody would notice if Farengar just disappeared. I find that kind of hard to believe given that he is one of the handful of people in this country with a unique voice, but sure, why not? I can murder him in cold blood for his keychain. So I unlock the door and there's my reward, the Ebony Blade. A 2-handed katana that swings about as quick as a 1-handed weapon, easily making it the fastest 2-handed sword in the game. It used to be a bugged weapon and scale off the 1-handed perks, but thankfully that did get patched out. Not that it would matter as I've been working both weapon skills rather evenly. Anyway, what makes it special besides its speed? Well, it has a health drain enchantment on it that never, ever degrades, so there's literally no reason to switch off constantly to the Mace of Molag Bal to recharge it. I don't need to explain just how monumental a never-ending health drain enchantment is for a build that, so far, has had no reliable way to heal outside of occasionally snacking on people's toes. We're not done yet though, as it gets even better. The enchantment can be upgraded in stages to drain even more health per hit. You do this by killing people who love you with it. Killing 10 people with the blade will max out its strength, so I go and begin doing just that. First and most obvious is Lydia. Anyone who's a follower of you is counted as someone that loves you, as well as anyone whose task you've completed, or just been overly nice to. So in Whiterun, for me, that includes the town drunk who I stole eel for, along with the 2 Battleborn brothers, who I made a good first impression on when first talking with them. Ysolda would also be a good candidate for this, but unfortunately she's marked as essential, probably due to her being the one who takes over the inn if you kill its current owner. To round off my friends in Whiterun, I deal with Amren. Oddly enough, he doesn't try to defend himself, so much for putting that sword I retrieved for you to good use. And next I went to Riverwood and dealt with Lucan and Camilla Valerius. I would have done Faendal as well, but I had plans for him later. Finally, turns out I missed a few orcs back at the stronghold, so this time I really do return and wipe them off the map. Once I do this, Mephala speaks to me one final time to confirm the Ebony Blade is at max power. Now it's back to the Dagon fetch quest. Alright, so one of the first pieces is in Morthal, probably one of the most forgettable towns in the game. I get to test the Ebony Blade out on some actual enemies at this point, and not just people who I managed to blindside due to our friendship. While it may not kill as quick as something like the never-ending heavies of the Volendrung, the fact that I am not having to worry about my health for once in encounters with more than one foe is certainly a nice change of pace. The healing factor is pretty nuts, I won't lie. Just look at how fast my health bar completely regens here while fighting just a single Thalmor wizard. After they're out of the picture, I make my way into town and find the man who is currently in possession of the hilt. I go to the man and I ask him, "Can I have it?" And he goes, "Yeah." Well, that was easy. By the way, he understands what it is. I guess he really just couldn't care. The next piece is a seemingly random outpost near Falkreath overrun with exclusively orc bandits. All of the unnamed orc fodder are just that, fodder. Most go down to a single hit plus the health drain effect after. That is all except for the leader of the bunch, Gunzel? Gahutzel? Anyway, he's fully kitted out with a battle axe and a full set of steel plate armor, so he's got some good defense behind him, along with a hefty swing on account of being an orc. If I had played smarter by not backing off and breaking his guard when he ready to swing, I could have easily won the fight, but as it stands, he splits me in two on the very first attempt. Despite having a sound strategy with the Ebony Blade, I ended up briefly switching back to my dual weapon setup, mainly because this time he wasn't aware of my presence, so I was able to get a dual power attack sneak crit on him. Following that up by spamming more flurries, and the fight is over in a matter of seconds. I take the key from the body, easily avoid all the traps in the basement, grab the shards of the blade, and begin making my way for the final piece of the dagger, held by some Forsworn out in the reach. The Ebony Blade continues to do work, so much so that one of the Forsworn, I guess, just figured he'd rather fight gravity than me. The Briarheart proved a longer fight than the rest, although not how you would expect. Mid-fight, while we are going back and forth, the Fugitive random event decides to pop in and hands me an iron greatsword. Luckily, I can mash the button to cancel out of the dialogue window quick enough that I don't lose too much health from the Briarheart. Now that my focus is 100% back on him, I take the victory and then see about getting my deserved revenge. All that leaves is the Haggraven running the show, who conveniently is also holding the pommel that we need. Thanks to the Ebony Blade, she can't output enough damage to counter its healing, so I am never at risk of losing the encounter. I take all three pieces back to Silas and then he asks us to meet him at the Shrine of Dagon, which we have already been to, so we can at least be there in a jiffy. After placing the razor on the pedestal, I'm able to communicate with Dagon, and I'm ordered to kill Silas if I want to keep the blade. Silas has a counter offer of us just taking the pieces back to Dawnstar, where he will then pay me gold for their retrieval. I cut him down without a second thought. With that, I can touch the altar one last time and have the dagger be reforged and ready to use. Mehrunes' razor has a unique enchantment where every hit with the blade has a very small chance to instantly kill whoever it is attacking. Depending on luck, it can either be exceptionally good or okay at best. To be fair, much like the Ebony Blade, the enchantment never runs dry, plus it does have a pretty high base damage for a dagger, one of the highest in the game for that weapon class if I'm not mistaken. Well, with that done, there is only one more artifact needed for the achievement that you can get once you collect all 13. However, there are technically 14 Daedric artifacts in the base game. You see, after completing 95% of the Thieves Guild questline, you eventually get your hands on the Skeleton Key, which is one of the Daedric artifacts of Nocturnal. And it's not just like some quest item that sits in your inventory and you can't use. No, it is a fully functioning, unbreakable lockpick that, so long as you do not finish the questline and return to Nocturnal, you can keep on your person indefinitely and never ever need to worry about breaking lockpicks again. You could make the argument that the final rank of the lockpicking skill tree makes your picks unbreakable, but that also requires you to put perks into the lockpicking tree, and I'm sorry, but you might want to get your head checked if you do that to make sure your brain is still functioning in there. The other argument against it is of course not finishing the Thieves Guild questline, which fair I guess, but by this point you will already have access to the Nightingale armor and weapons, which, let's be real, are the sickest rewards from the Thieves Guild and one of the only reasons to do that questline. In other words, you have nothing to lose and really everything to gain by keeping the Skeleton Key to yourself. So, as you can see from the footage, yes, that means I am going through the vast majority of the Thieves Guild to get just the Skeleton Key. Not going to go into excruciating detail about this, despite it being an entire questline about stealth and taking things slow, there's not much to talk about. Besides, Skyrim's Thieves Guild is not really a Thieves-esque questline, rather it feels more like B-tier Oblivion Fighters Guild quests. What I mean by that is, despite the guild going on and on about not being the Dark Brotherhood, so only sneaking and robbing, not sneaking and killing, there isn't really ever a single mission where you can't just walk in with a greatsword and start stabbing. Now, for the first mission, I did try to stealth for a bit. Not for any roleplay purposes, but rather that's another skill to level up to get us to 30. In fact, I do get spotted, and at that moment it turns into a bloodbath, and wouldn't you know it, I don't get reprimanded for it in the slightest. Also, while we're here, here's another fun trick with the flame spell. So, you're meant to burn 3 of the beehives here in this quest to send a message, right? Well, if for whatever reason you don't want to actively cast the flame spell, you can just equip it to your hand, and then you can just walk into the hives. This will then light them up without the need to actually fire the spell. Is it useful? Not at all. But if you were wanting to try beating the Thieves Guild questline without ever attacking in any shape or form, this would technically be a workaround. Next quest, killing rats in a basement. That is literally a Fighters Guild quest from Morrowind. After witnessing the lighting just collapse in itself in the guild hall, it's on to our next task, finding out more information about someone sabotaging the guild, and we do this by tailing an Argonian through a warehouse, until it ultimately devolves into another fight with some bandits. Thieves Guild, everybody! Thieves Guild. With the info, we return to Mercer Frey, the guild leader. He then tells us that the woman we're looking for is Karliah, and we're going to go hunt her down. We do this by loudly fighting our way through your average Draugr ruins. Finally, something mildly interesting happens when it turns out Mercer is actually the one who betrayed Karliah years ago, and that he murdered the former guildmaster, and she is trying to set things right. I would like to point out that Karliah is currently invisible with a bow trained on Mercer Frey. Yeah, she says she wants to take Mercer in alive and that she used her one knockout poison on me instead. Okay, that's fair. But like, take a page out of every guard's background and just shoot him in the knee or something. Anyway, the two of us get to work translating a journal, but first we need the cipher to do so. By heading to the Dwemer Museum in Markarth with some charcoal and paper to make a rubbing, we can do just that. Credit where it's due, sneaking is actually very good in this quest and you are technically stealing something, so it's actually very fitting for once. With the former guildmaster's journal translated, me and Karliah return to the guild, reveal Mercer's treachery, find that he somehow had pockets big enough to loot the entirety of the guild's funds, doing so without anyone noticing, I might add, and now it is my job to try and find out where he has gone by breaking and entering into his house in Riften. To get into the house, we're supposed to shoot a lock mechanism connected to a ramp with an arrow or with a shout. Well, much like the beehive situation earlier with the flame spell, I wanted to see if there was a way for me to go about this without needing to use any weapons. Just for fun. As far as I can tell, the ramp leads to the only entrance as the front door is locked and cannot be picked. So, to get by, I resort to some good old Skyrim gymnastics. The locked gate here is just high enough that we can't jump on top of it, so instead I hop onto one of the nearby braziers and use that to reach the lower part of the church roof. I tried jumping from here to the top of the ramp, but I was just out of reach. So instead I climbed back to the church roof and then slid down so I was just down on top of the aforementioned gate. From here I could then easily jump to the edge of Mercer's roof, and then by giving it the old zigzag and rapid jumping technique I could slowly make my way up to the roof, to the point where I could then just hop down behind the ramp and enter the house. Is it sad to say that figuring out that jumping path was the most fun I had in the Thieves Guild questline? Well, once inside we do some more killing, because of course we do, and then we find out that Mercer is going after something called the Eyes of the Falmer, and should he find them, he'll be able to sell them off and be set for life. Karliah then tells me and Brynjolf that the only way to beat Mercer is for the two of us to join her and become Nightingales, and we kinda just agree without a second thought. After all, you cannot deny how good this drip looks. Even though the Nightingale set is literally given to us by Nocturnal, a Daedric prince, I don't see it as an artifact, so other than this initiation here, I won't be wearing them any further. This all leads to the penultimate mission, which is, of course, trekking through another set of ruins and killing just about everything in sight, whether they be Falmer or robots. I'll be honest, I just book it past everything until I make it to the boss fight with Mercer. With his powers of mind control, which I guess he has now, Mercer commands Brynjolf to attack Karliah while me and Mercer duke it out one-on-one. I briefly transform him into a chicken so that his appearance can now finally match his attitude, before switching back to the Ebony blade to effortlessly skewer him after a few good swings. From his body we loot the Eyes of the Falmer, which, by the way, are not that valuable judging by this, along with the skeleton key. With the key in hand, we are instructed to return it from whence it came, But we're of course not doing that as it's far too valuable. I have essentially just become another Mercer Frey. With that, only one artifact remains, the Ebony Meal, but as mentioned, we need to be level 30 before we can even begin the quest, so now it is time for the mega grind. I made use of the skeleton key by unlocking the various locked training chests in the guild to get some easy lockpicking levels, seeing how I literally cannot fail them anymore. Plus, I also did your usual round around old bandit camps to stand around and work on my armor and block skills, or to bludgeon them to death for easy melee levels. I did this for a while, but truth be told, much like writing this script and working on this video, it was taking way longer than it really should have. So I resorted to some quick cheap grinding methods. 3 come to mind that I personally know of, 2 that I use, 1 that I don't. First, you can get almost infinite free skill ups off followers who train skills, so long as you're below their skill level and have some money for the lessons. See, if you can make them your follower, you can pay for the lesson and then immediately trade with them and take the gold back from their inventory. Problem is, you can only do 5 sessions per level, and that the only trainer I had was Faendal, but after the whole murdering the woman he loved thing to power up my thirsty sword, he is no longer friends with me and will not follow. Alright, second option, I just purchase a soul trap spell from any random wizard, kill something normally, and then repeatedly cast soul trap on the dead body. For whatever reason, this still gives conjuration levels. It's slow, given that I have to wait between each cast, but it is reliable. It takes a bit, but I do hit 30. In fact, I zoned out due to the monotony, and ended up going 1 level beyond and reached 31. Now that we have reached the threshold, all we need to do is find a book that now spawns in the game world about Bohethia, and the quest can begin. After the monotonous grinding, I could not be bothered to wait around for merchants to find the book, so I just looked up guaranteed spawn locations. Turns out one will appear in Septimus' outpost, and thankfully me already visiting the place did not cause it to mess up. With the shrine now marked on the map, I immediately make my way there, and they tell me that Bohethia demands a sacrifice from me, so I am to go and find one. Well, seeing how I murdered just about all of my previous potential followers earlier, I just resorted to buying out somebody's services. Sorry Belran, but I guess you drew the short straw this time. I tell him to touch the random spooky pole, he's an idiot so obliges, and then I kill him for my 14th god of the week. She takes control of his body, and long story short, to decide who is the strongest of her followers, she has us all immediately fight to the death. I was expecting this to be like a Dark Souls gank fight and to get absolutely swarmed by them, but to my delight, they did fight amongst themselves. They have more health than I expected, but other than that, they're not all that remarkable in terms of fighting capabilities, so I easily win the bout. Bohethia returns to congratulate me and points me in the direction of her current champion, who has the Ebony Meal, and that it's my job to kill him and his followers to secure my right as her favourite person. She also mentions something about doing it stealthily, but it doesn't seem to affect anything. I go into that camp swinging like a madman, and the stealthy objective just never even says that it failed, so goodness knows what that's about. The champion is kind of a pushover, although to be fair, I did summon a Dremora to even the playing field given that he already had his own band of misfits, taking the armor from his body, and it's definitely an improvement over the Saviour's Hide. The armor rating alone is a vast improvement, plus its poisoning effect can help add on extra passive damage during close range fights, and the fact that it's muffled means its stealth is now finally a very viable option. The hide isn't completely replaced though, it does have magic resistance remember, so it'll still be good against mages and, to be honest, dragons, as their breath attacks are classified as magic after all. I quickly mop up the final few misguided bandits and the quest is complete. And with that, I have now every Daedric artifact in the base game. If I was smart, I would have done this on a new profile to get the serotonin of the achievement bloop, but whatever. Well, with all the demon artifacts collected and only mildly corrupting me with their presence, I suppose the only thing left to do is the main quest. Seems almost redundant given what we've went through up to this point, but you can't say you haven't beaten the run if you don't actually complete the main quest after all. Granted, I can't see this being too difficult outside of Alduin, who's always skilled to be stronger than the player. I make my way up the 7,000 steps, and of course, have a run-in with our old friend, the Frost Troll. Oddly enough, I haven't really fought many trolls in the run, other than those whose fat we needed before, so I wasn't sure how this would go. Well, with me finally having hit the level threshold for all of the items, I don't have to worry anymore about what I'm using, so I happily switched to the Wabbajack and made it heal. I meet up with the Greybeards, go through their long drawn-out training programs, which I try to skip most of by doing the sprinting headbutt dialogue skip glitch, and once that's out of the way, it's off to Ustengrav to collect their fancy drinking horn. Given that it's mostly undead, I switch off to the Dawnbreaker as it's supposedly more effective against them. I also put Mehrunes' razor in my left hand as I figured I hadn't got much use out of it yet and that I should rectify that. Oh, don't worry, we are most certainly about to rectify that. The undead don't faze me all that much, although I was taken aback at just how tough the leveled frostbite spiders have become. I suppose poison is always deadly if you don't have anything to counteract it. But anyway, I get the horn, except not really, find Delphine, and now it's time to go dragon hunting at Kynesgrove. I was prepared for a possibly difficult fight here. After all, I am at a decent level, so the dragons should start packing more of a punch, so strategizing about what weapon would best suit the encounter. Or I could get super lucky and instantly proc the razor special effect and one-shot the thing before it even has a chance to realize it's been revived. This one simple kill is what made me start using the razor so much more. Again, much like with the staffs, it doesn't need XP anymore, so there is literally no downside to killing enemies in one shot and missing out on levels. Of course, I'm not always going to be this lucky, but still, it's a fun enchantment to mess around with. Speaking of the razor, I get a lot of good use pairing it with the Ebony mail while I'm at the Thalmor Embassy. I'm able to channel my inner Metal Gear player and effortlessly sneak around and silently take out all the Thalmor and Pergisser one by one without ever being spotted. I somehow even was able to kill the two that brought in Malborn without the other one knowing what was going on. Afterwards, we rescue Esbern and do the usual song and dance at the temple to paint circles on the floor with my blood. Sorry to skip over those two quests, but nothing of note really happened. Just more Thalmor and Forsworn bullying. Given that I already have the scroll, this means I skip right ahead to the first fight with Alduin, and as you can probably tell from how long is left of the run, this went very well. Much better than I could ever have hoped for being real. So, by this point, I had taken to mainly sticking with the Razor and Spellbreaker. Spellbreaker seemed like a good call to be able to stun bash Alduin, as well as being able to use its ward to defend against even a little bit of his fire breath. The Razor, honestly, I had just grown to like how fast it was. Its speed meant that I could guard break most enemies before they ever had a chance to counterattack. What I did not expect was for the Razor to take effect on Alduin. I had just assumed that he'd be immune, but he isn't. Considering he doesn't die here, and it works, we can only assume that it will also work on the second fight in Sovngarde. And you would be correct. You know, I was kind of expecting a long slog of a battle, at least on the first Alduin encounter. Well, yeah, I guess you can indeed beat Skyrim with only Daedric artifacts. So, while the ending may not have gone how I thought, the rest of the run did. Not so much difficult, but rather tedious. It makes me wonder just how much better or worse something similar would be, you know, like the New Vegas with only uniques or Oblivion with only Daedric artifacts. No doubt we'll get to them one day. Regardless, that's going to be the end of this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like. If you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe as I try to run these videos out fairly frequently. My name's Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.